Okay.
You got this, Greg.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Cindy? Is that on?
She's
Okay.
going.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Greg Beimer with Klein Peter Consulting Group. This is the second required public hearing by Okra for public input on your comprehensive planning grant that you received from that agency. So we have with us tonight the consultant who mainly wrote and put the program and the plan together, Scott Siepert. I'm going to turn it over to him. He can go over the plan. At the end, if there are questions or comments, that's what I'm here for, to make sure that there aren't any open-ended issues, or that everybody has a question, and if you do, it gets answered. So Scott, thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you.
Yep.
So good evening. As Greg mentioned, my name is Scott Siepert. I'm with Taylor Siepert Williams Design Group, and we have been the consulting practice that's been helping the town develop the comprehensive plan over the last several months. So tonight we've got a final draft together. There's been along the way several different opportunities for community conversations and input. But I want to kind of share with you, again, a little bit of a refresh in terms of where we've been, kind of how we put the plan together, what's sort of in the plan, so the elements in terms of the topics that the plan addresses, and then finally wrap up with the next steps as we conclude the planning process. So with that, and for several of you that have been involved throughout the last several months, this should all be repeat or very familiar, but we do want to share kind of, again, the holistic, if you will, approach about what the community did in terms of executing the development of this planning process. So in terms of the kind of the planning overview, or why the community wanted to start this process, it wanted to look at in terms of identifying kind of these four key questions of where Dayton is today, so that existing conditions analysis, where the community is going. So we looked at trends and demographics and other kind of data to document that. Then we took a look at, in terms of conversationally, where does Dayton want to go? And so again, I mentioned some of those public outreach or community conversations that we had that began to give us some feedback or direction in terms of where's the community we want to go. And then as a plan kind of gets put together in terms of implementation steps, we outline some direction in terms of, well, how do you begin to achieve some of those goals? From a comprehensive plan standpoint, for those of you that are not familiar, and for those of you that have been participating, you're very much aware of kind of what we've been working on. But for reference, when we say a comprehensive plan for a community, whether that's a city, a town, a county, or what have you, Indiana State Code outlines sort of four basic elements that they articulate in code that needs to be in a community's comprehensive plan. So that includes a community vision statement, so that sort of lofty, if you will, goal direction of where's the community you want to head. It includes a future land use discussion and map, and so that is something that we have because that's required. Transportation and utilities, so there's some infrastructure discussion and mapping that's required. And then finally, community facilities, so things like maybe public safety or other kind of recreation, those kind of broad community facilities. That's really all that the sort of the state statute outlines in terms of when a community is developing a comprehensive plan, the basic elements that need to be included. As Greg mentioned, your process was funded through a grant by the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, so a state agency, and they take kind of that base level and add some other elements on top of that, or in addition to that, I should say, that they request that a community looks at. And so that kind of list of items varying from placemaking to economic development to historic or archaeological resources, those are identified in the Okra process. And so we again spent some time developing and talking about that, because through your grant, in order to meet your grant requirements, these had to also be addressed. So together, when you have kind of the baseline, if you will, code kind of requirements that you have to address, plus then through your grant funding required elements, those together equal your comprehensive plan. So when I walk through it here this evening, that's why you'll hear me talking about sort of these dozen or so different topic or plan elements, and that's where that is coming from, if that makes sense. So our planning process, as I mentioned, we had a kind of a sort of a three-phase, if you will, approach to the process where the first third of the project was all about the existing conditions and understanding the demographics, population growth, or trends, looking at existing physical conditions out in the community, mapping and documenting all of that. The second phase then really was on that plan development side, where we began to draft some strategies or goals or objectives for all of those dozen or so required different plan elements that I just highlighted. And then our last phase here, the implementation and adoption, is once the draft was put together and the steering committee reviewed that, it did go back to the state, so it went back to Okra for their review. They have since now returned that with no comments, so congratulations to you all in terms of their review on that. They have said this was, met all the requirements, and now we're in the sort of the initiation of your adoption phase, which, this evening is one step in terms of that adoption series. All along, we've had some opportunities for community or public input and conversation, and that's been inclusive in terms of each phase of the work. So just briefly, I'll highlight a little bit. Again, this is all in the document that's been available. It's been online, I believe. So a printed out version looks something like this. But again, the digital version has all been available and currently still is, I'm assuming, available on the town website. So you'll note then the kind of the section there that deals with the physical conditions, where we looked at, again, sort of the land use patterns that were existing, the existing utility service or other environmental issues. We looked at some of the demographic and social data. We spent a whole meeting, I think one meeting with the steering committee, kind of talking about some of the demographic and baseline trends that we were seeing, and that's all documented. Some key takeaways that we, kind of saw through some of that is that, your median age has risen in the last several years while you've experienced a population decline. And a lot of the homes in terms of the housing stock is owner occupied with an increase, if you will, in sort of single person households. So some things to take into consideration as we talked about some of the sort of the land use or economic development sections of the plan. So again, in some of those engagement highlights, just referencing a few of these opportunities that we had for various touch points in the community. We had a couple of different open houses that the community was invited to participate in, both at the sort of the big idea visioning stage, and then once again when we had some draft recommendations put together. We did two different surveys, and so I know the material here is difficult to read. Again, it's all available online, but kind of a variety of questions regarding the first survey dealt with kind of those existing perceptions of the community and, your big ideas or wish list of the community. Whereas the second online survey that was released, that one dealt more with people reacting, providing opportunities to comment or react to some of the plan strategies or recommendations. So those were a couple of additional methods of community outreach in addition to the open house workshop type sessions. So moving on to, again, kind of some of the key planning elements. And again, a lot of this was driven based on that input that we heard. So if people were commenting on a variety of things in terms of enhancement of corridors or additional restaurants in the community, we tried to take what does that mean and turn that into something in terms of some of these plan elements. And so this is where some of that information then was utilized as we began to sort of base kind of the strategies and development for the various plan elements. When you do get a chance, if you haven't already, to review the plan, it is organized into sort of 4 sections or chapters, however you want to call that. And again, this is mandated or outlined by the Okra process. So Okra has a pretty definitive way that they like to see the plans that they help support organized. And so the first section is that executive summary where we cover kind of the process and the summary and some of the key goals and takeaways. The second section or chapter is all about the existing background or general background. So just kind of that summary in terms of that community snapshot. The third section or chapter really kind of goes over the comprehensive plan committee, so the steering committee, what their role was, who was involved and how they were involved and engaged. And then finally, the fourth section, or the fourth chapter, is really the meat of the plan in terms of those various a dozen plus planning elements. Each one is addressed individually in that section. So within that, we had sort of those series of elements that we needed to address. In our minds, as we began to sort of take some of the feedback and organize them in a thoughtful manner, they really sort of kind of grouped together in terms of areas that sort of supported or enhanced the outdoors, areas that promoted quality design, and areas that really elevated economic growth or economic prosperity. And so when we talked about each one of these sort of plan elements, which you can see below here, each one of those sort of reference one of those either concepts or big ideas. The arrangement, and you view the plan, all of the plan elements, so those dozen plus elements are all organized the same, so when you're reading through them, whether you want to just focus in on kind of one or two specifically, or the whole series, the format is always the same. You begin, there's an existing conditions, sort of a summary or narrative that presents what the topic is. So if it's transportation, it goes through, here's kind of the existing conditions snapshot of that particular topic. Then it goes through, sort of the goals and strategies for that particular topic, followed by any kind of supporting graphics for that topic. And in some instances, like the transportation as an example, there'd be a map that's the supporting graphic with that topic. In other categories here, this example that I'm showing is the placemaking topic. There are some other graphics for community, signage or other kind of amenities that fall into that category. So supporting graphics are included as sort of that third, if you will, sequence or element within the chapters. And then finally, the implementation of that action schedule for how do we get some of these ideas related to this topic done? Who's involved, what roles, what type of funding resources could be made available or utilized for said type of projects. So this is across the board how each of the individual plan elements are presented. And so as you're reading through them, there should be some consistency with how those are all organized and presented. I'll go through each of the dozen just very briefly, just so you can kind of get a key takeaway from each one of them. Primarily looking at sort of the kind of the goal related, maybe a couple of the maybe strategies related to the said topic, and then maybe a couple of the supporting graphics if appropriate. So the first topic, or the first plan element was land use, or is land use. And so again, we had three sort of supporting strategies to the goal of looking at sound development through quality planning decisions and any redevelopment or reinvestment. And so we identified kind of some strategies that would help support that. We've identified some timelines in terms of like this is a high priority for the community to work on, or maybe a lower priority, because again in the comprehensive plan sort of horizon, over the course of 10 years, some things are more of a 1 to 2 year kind of higher priority, and some things were identified that you're working on, but for a variety of reasons this is a longer term sort of strategy or objective that you're working on. And again, those are all presented in the implementation table, and again, it's all available online if you'd like to kind of look in terms of the details of what each of the individual strategies are. And in this case, the supporting graphic for the land use, again, this is per, if you recall what I mentioned, Indiana Code required kind of those basic elements to be included. The future land use map is one of those. So the future land use map is presented in this section. And again, it highlights a variety of things from, preservation to mixed-use development to housing to commercial investment areas and where those should go. I will point out that the future land use map is different. Comprehensive planning, or comprehensive plan does not create a zoning map. That's a whole separate piece. That's a legal document. Your comprehensive plan is a policy document or a policy statement. And so it's just the vision of, kind of the communities had these opportunities to have a conversation and kind of put their arms around where they'd like to go. This documents that in terms of an overall vision or overall policy, which is different than a legally binding zoning document or zoning map. So this is not a zoning map. And I think that's something that is, I think, important to point out when we talk about future land use and the difference between kind of, if something were to happen, this is kind of what we would like to see as a community, but it doesn't change anything that's legally allowed as current zoning legally allows it. That's all a whole separate initiative. One of the follow-up implementation items, oftentimes from a comprehensive plan, would be to review your current zoning, and are there adjustments that need to be made, and that would be a separate project or a separate, if you will, plan implementation item that you may want to look at. If there are some things that a community wants to sort of do that from a future land use standpoint, that their zoning, if they want to look at where we're standing right here and they want to make this into apartments above, and it wasn't zoned for that, you would want to then look at your zoning code to see, like, well, are we doing something that negatively impacts what we're trying to sort of do? Again, a separate project and different than what a future land use map or future land use graphic shows. So I do want to point that out. So anyway, that's included in terms of that first of the plan elements is land use. The second plan element is government and fiscal capacity, and within this particular plan element, it was talking about making sure that sound, fiscally responsible decisions and the ability of town to support the growth are made and supported. A variety of strategies, again, were identified for that, an implementation table regarding, kind of the timelines and how we get other parties or other perhaps collaborating agencies to work with us on that could be identified. The third plan element was public facilities and services. So this had to deal more, again, with the community utilities or services as related to some of your stormwater or drainage, that sort of thing. So some goals that were developed or identified as part of that to help provide high efficiency community utilities, facilities, and services were all included as part of this area. And again, some graphics were developed that began to articulate, like if you were to maybe do some different things regarding, in this particular case, stormwater management, here's maybe a thought of how that could sort of be addressed. And so those kind of elements are included as part of the public facilities and services section. The fourth plan element is placemaking. So this really deals with the character and culture of the communities. So a lot of the things that are bricks and mortar type of things. So your streetscapes or gateways or what have you. And so we had a variety of goals developed as part of the placemaking category. And again, it's an easy one to kind of wrap your arm around in terms of we all like some bricks and mortars and flower pots and banners and color and what have you. So those are things that certainly all began to sort of be identified. A lot of the community feedback certainly addressed some of the ideas that they would like to see in terms of some of the placemaking enhancements. Again, and the idea of, wouldn't necessarily have to look like this by any stretch of the imagination, but the idea of a uniform signage throughout the community, everything from gateways to maybe historic district identification to maybe some vehicular wayfinding or what have you. The idea of sort of that type of initiative is one of the elements that came out of the placemaking discussions. And so graphically, again, this is just a sample of how a unified package can begin to sort of be developed and then all hang together and reinforce a particular community brand or community image. The next plan element category is economic development, and with that one, a lot of discussion was about supporting the environment for both commercial and retail development, as well as supporting current and future business development and growth. And so, again, similarly, some series of strategies were identified in terms of everything from business incubator to some other commercial retail development space or opportunity. Housing, another topic in terms of the plan elements. So like sort of the business side of economic development, this dealt with thinking about how do we broaden perhaps our housing types within the community. And so this was really looking at, we say residents of all ages, incomes, and stages of life. So the idea that, if you're transitioning from maybe a detached single-family home and still want to stay in the Dayton area, is there a place for you? if not, how can we maybe identify a spot that we could then begin to promote or encourage development to occur that would, allow that to happen. And so that was one example that came up in terms of the sort of the goals or strategy discussion related to housing. Transportation, again, one of the required from the state statute elements that is in the plan. So this really, again, talks about everything from your vehicular to your non-motorized, so your pedestrian, your sidewalks, those sorts of things are all included under the umbrella of transportation. And so there is an accompanying map in terms of some of the transportation objectives related to some of the connectivity within, even on the sidewalk side of things, within the community, and how to broaden and strengthen and reinforce that from a mobility standpoint. It also certainly talks about other elements such as, again, you did a sidewalk condition and mobility assessment. Certainly implement that. Your safe route to school program, again, is another initiative to potentially take advantage of in terms of, again, broadening and supporting the mobility type of topics within the transportation category. Agriculture, again, one of the plan elements. Again, this is the Okra list. We understand within Dayton itself, there really isn't necessarily, if we were doing a countywide plan, that you would have obviously a broader discussion on agriculture. But there were a couple of things in terms of the supporting of the town being supportive of agricultural economy. Whether that's through development of, again, agritourism or other types of, even a farmer's market or what have you. So not as maybe robust of a section of a chapter as some of the others, just given kind of the context of the community, but one that we had to certainly provide some sort of address topic to, given the kind of that was one of the required Okra categories. Similarly, natural resources, so there, sort of the South Fork Wildcat Creek that was identified in terms of an area that we wanted to limit negative impacts in terms of an ongoing element, but again, within the town limits itself, you don't have like a big natural forest stand or something like that that we needed to specifically address that would maybe fall into this category. So. But looking at perhaps the tree inventory through the downtown area and talking about, like, is there an urban tree canopy or assessment that could be done that again would fall in this natural resources category and sort of the built environment versus the natural environment. Parks and recreation, another larger, if you will, a more robust section in terms of one of the plan element chapters. Again, a lot of community feedback on these types of elements, and it makes sense. It's things that, when people think about quality of life or elements that are why they're living or working and, establishing a business in a certain area, kind of parks and recreation would certainly be something that people look at. So looking at things here to kind of continue to expand on the recreation opportunities within Dayton were discussed. The establishment of a parks board and the creation of a 5-year park and rec plan, which would open you up to additional funding opportunities for supportive of park and recreation initiatives was identified. And then obviously maintaining some of your existing amenities were included. And there was even a kind of a vision discussion and the sort of the community area just adjacent here to Town Hall, and maybe how to expand that from an idea standpoint. Obviously, we'd be collaborating partners to make something like this happen, but from a big idea standpoint, we talked about, like, what is your big idea? This was one that sort of came out of some of those discussions, and the idea of, again, making a town square that had more variety of uses or programmed areas or what have you was one that we kind of wanted to address, and whether this is, a kind of a final area that this could occur, but the idea of identifying an area where something like this could occur would be a benefit, certainly, to enhancing the park and recreation aspects of the community. So again, some of the, on the recreation, kind of what I just said there in terms of securing land to provide additional gathering spaces, whether that's here or working with collaborative partners adjacent here, and then the funding resources to implement some of those, and again, encouraging the establishment of the Parks and Rec Board, again, because that would allow some other funding sources for things dedicated to parks and recreational services. The next category, broadband access. So again, this was all talking about technology and some, certainly increasing on the affordable high-speed service on the internet and digital platforms. And so fundamentally, there was a strong base here, and it was just working to continue to elevate that. Whereas in some communities we go to, this really is a struggle for them, and that baseline here was one that was already a positive. So that's very, very good. And then finally, some of the historic and archaeological resources category. So things like identifying or supporting historic preservation where appropriate, like a structure over here could be an example, or some of the, from a facade rehabilitation improvement program, helping to support or aid owners in terms of improving some of those commercial buildings were all ideas or strategies in terms of the supporting goals in the historic archaeological resources category. And again, a quick graphic in terms of the supporting graphics that were developed as part of this, which was a facade enhancement on the front of Town Hall here. So again, simple things in terms of being able to show concepts or ideas as related to some of the goals and the strategies that were identified. I believe, yes, the last category of the series of plan elements was hazard mitigation. And again, in some communities, say if you had, I don't know, like a coal mine or something within your community that you're having to sort of deal with, this would be a more robust section. In your case, the hazard mitigation section really just talks about the more on the safety side in terms of residents and disaster preparedness. And so from our standpoint, we continue to work with the Tippecanoe County Emergency Management Agency on keeping the hazard mitigation plan up to date and participating in that where appropriate. And again, making sure your notification system for emergencies, audible, sirens, digital platforms, what have you, are all in clear working order. And if things need to be acquired to continue to improve those, that is something that is identified to be acquired. So this one really, again, instead of maybe environmental hazard mitigation, it really, you have some of those existing conditions to sort of deal with, so it really deals mostly with safety and preparedness. Questions on any of those kind of plan elements before I just kind of summarize with them? Oh, actually, you do the questions. I'm so used to doing questions that let me wrap up then with sort of the next steps, and then I'll turn it back over to questions. I apologize. I just get in a roll, and I'm used to breaking for questions. So today we're giving obviously this sort of just overview of the planning process, kind of what we heard in the organization of the plan itself. Again, this is all available online. You can read, print out, document the whole draft plan. We will then be going to the Tippecanoe County Area Plan Commission. This basically same overview presentation will be given to the Plan Commission, and then we'll be coming back to the Town Council for their action. There is no action on this particular evening. Your action in terms of that would be after the Plan Commission. They would hopefully request a favorable recommendation, and if the Town Council then deems so appropriate, you would then adopt it that next September-ish. If we can get the Area Plan Commission meeting in between, it's your September meeting. So that would be then the kind of the closeout, if you will, of the comprehensive planning process. Now I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. I'm sure you'll agree there's been a lot of work and effort put into this, both on Scott's part and the folks in the community. Is there anything that, as Scott was speaking, that you go, ooh, that raises a question or a comment? Jen, you have anything you want to add or say?
I don't think so. I'm excited that we're at completion and we finally have a plan for our town, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm looking forward to implementing some things.
Yes.
For
Thanks.
sure.
Anyone else? Yes.
Do you want name and
Yeah,
address?
sure. Go ahead.
Cindy Marsh, 749 Shady Lane here in Dayton. And I've advocated for this plan for a long time, and so I'm just overjoyed really tonight as we're getting near the finish line. And I'm so pleased that it's been such a smooth process, and we've offered opportunities for the entire community to participate if they chose to. And there were surveys and open houses and public meetings, and there was anyone that wanted to had an opportunity to have input. And I'm really delighted with the end product, and I think Scott and Sam have done a great job.
Good.
And I'm delighted to have a roadmap for the town's future.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Scott, do you have anything then that you want to say as a wrap-up?
No, I would just encourage, either members, the steering committee that, certainly helped throughout the process. At the Plan Commission meeting, we always encourage those that participated in the plan to, come to that presentation as well. And, I know that there's been a liaison in terms of the commissioner that has worked on, and are aware in terms of what the process is. But it always does, I think, myself, you mentioned Sam and other staff members have been working on. For us, it does, our heart's good when we see the community members like getting up and talking about it in terms of, because at the end of the day, we don't want it to be like our plan. We want to make sure that it's embraced in terms of this is what you all said, and it was our job as facilitators just to organize and document that series of conversation and those ideas and those thoughts. And so I would encourage, maybe, coming to that meeting, to provide a statement of support or feedback or what have you in terms of your observations of the process, and then the final, town council, then hopefully adoption. You're certainly welcome to share things there as well. But we would always encourage that as it transitions from us as sort of the owners, if you will, to we want to make sure that that the local individual's voice is the predominant voice that's heard. So
very good. From the standpoint of meeting the OPRA requirements, we've heard the draft plan presentation. We've allowed comments from the public. So I know you've got other business, so we can officially wrap this up unless anybody has any last minute comment or question.
I did have one thing I didn't get in here. The map on the land use map. Is there any chance you could scroll to that? I'm wondering if there wasn't a section that probably should have been in green, because as I'm seeing this, if it goes to area plan, then this is probably how they would look at future use for land in this area, and so it's going to be part of this map, I think. And then so at the upper right-hand corner there, I don't know what the green sections here. What is the green?
this shade of green.
Yeah, that shade of green.
That's rural agriculture.
Okay, but is that basically looking at that and it's saying, yeah, this is possible growth area for the town?
So the town boundary in terms of the dashed, sort of line or what have you, is the town boundary. The county is also looking at in terms of updating their comprehensive plan, is my understanding, and they were waiting, if you will, in terms of if you had any kind of suggestion in terms of outside of the boundary of the community, what that would like to sort of be in terms of some land use suggestions. Otherwise, they'll fill it in for you as well. So this was areas that were identified in terms of future growth potential, just by the nature of like where it is in relation to kind of the community town boundary.
Okay. So on the upper right-hand corner there was a section.
That here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the right, just to the right of that. That area right there. Yeah. It seems to me that's 800 right there. Isn't it? That's heading north and south.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It seems to me like that section right there should probably be in green as well.
It could be.
So,
go ahead, finish your thought.
well, because that's part of our water jurisdiction area.
Okay.
So that's, I think that if I were looking at this, I would say, well, maybe they're not interested in that. But I would say, yeah, since it's in our water jurisdiction, that we would be interested in that.
Yeah, so the black line is sort of the growth, kind of the initial sort of growth boundary. Your green line is the dashed current boundary. So it is beyond kind of what, but if that's something that seemingly is appropriate or makes sense, that could be adjusted.
I just wouldn't want this to go in front of somebody and they say, Oh, well, they're not interested in that. That's, so, my preference would be that, whatever it is that we feel like the long-term future is going to be, that it should be identified with this.
So
with this
you're
plan.
talking, in essence, it's sort of extending this boundary, whatever,
Yes.
and including that as part of the,
Yes.
sort of that rural agriculture.
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Good comment. Very good. And so noted, and Scott, I think you've got ample time to make some changes before that presentation goes to the county. So, any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Scott, are you actually on the agenda already for the Area Plan Commission meeting in August?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that there's coordination, that they know it's coming. I don't know, like, if, I'm not 100%, so I don't want to say yay or
We'll
nay.
double
that-
check that. We'll double check.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know.
I haven't received an agenda yet, and I won't until the Thursday before, so
Hopefully there's
the
time.
agenda has not been cemented.
Okay, so
So-
maybe,
I don't know why you couldn't.
okay. I know
Anything
David
else?
knows that it's coming. He's
Yes.
aware, but I don't know the
Right.
logistics of getting on the agenda.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Going once, going twice. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We'll wrap this up. Appreciate your help and input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Five-minute intermission while you get
Yeah.
yourself reset.
Somebody turn on some like music, some television. Okay, let me take some jazz. I don't know if you better go somewhere else.
No, I tried to get hold of her all day.
Okay, that's fine.
I called, another one, my thing I go to is.
The more names, the better.
Yes. You can get the next.
Yes, we're all camera shy, aren't you?
Oh, that's my favorite, actually. Thank you. It just writes so nice.
It does, yeah.
Sounds pretty good, actually.
Forward or something?
I seem to have like suddenly braided all these together. I don't know how.
I don't want you to pick it up. I said it 2 times. You pick it up so I can pick it up. See, aren't you missing Sam now too, Scott?
Right, because she'd be helping me with this all.
Good rain or something?
How many stop signs do we have on Dayton? Do you have any idea? Oh, come on.
What's the series then?
Oh, that's for the,
I think
Yeah, that's cool. I agree.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I needed that last week.
that's it, just the,
Just these?
yep, just the,
Okay.
or the house trip and
Okay, put it back.
No question. No question.
No question.
See the smoke that stinks.
Put it on here.
Didn't burn the whole day.
oh no, you're good. I'm sorry to do it.
No, you're fine. There's like two things. No, you're fine. No, you're totally fine. Thanks, guys. Perfect.
What was the plan commission date you mentioned?
Just
Third Wednesday of the month.
The third is okay.
So that's when the airplane meeting.
Yeah.
Probably no chance we can get it in this month.
I don't know why not.
Okay.
I don't know why we couldn't.
Oftentimes,
The most in the house has something to say no.
we can have Sam on things like that. But I mean, if you want somebody to come, we can do that too. But it's usually very quick. It's usually very quick.
Yes, yes. That would be.
Well, you never know if they're going to walk into
Screen like this one. I don't hear yourself, Greg, but you got light. It's up. It's up.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye,
Take care.
guys.
Yeah.
I could go up there and recite the Pledge of Allegiance or something. We haven't really done it. I don't know. I hate it. They have some serious issues. I was just yesterday thinking that,
Yeah.
it's just, I hate it. I mean, I have fun. But, Jesus.
Okay, sorry about that delay. All right, just a couple things on the agenda now. It's up there. Did you remember? Okay.
No, we're, never mind, she
Do you need it?
Oh, the agenda.
All right. We didn't start with roll call. Let's take roll call. Mark,
Here.
Stan,
Here.
Ron,
here.
Carla, and I'm here, so we have all of us. All right. Baker Farms access road issue. Do you want to give an update on that?
Sure. The road's falling apart, as we mentioned before, so we met out there a couple weeks ago with Malacus, and we asked them to do a core test to see what's under the road, and they eventually came out and did one, and only tested the thickness of the asphalt instead of the whole substructure under there, the stone and everything. So anyway, BF&S has asked Malacus and Doug Denny, who put in the road for Midwest Paving, to come up with some solutions on it and redo a core testing a little deeper so we really know what's under there. So that's where it stands right now. And hopefully, my suggestion is they've had a week now, and by our next meeting, they need to come up with some ideas so we can talk about it, really get this thing finished and get the road repaired.
Who's going to do the analysis of the core samples?
Well, I think they want to, but I think we need to have another engineer look at what's been done at that road and give their suggestions on why that thing's falling apart. And also look at those core samples and decide, not just, so far it's been Malacus's engineers that designed it basically, and then them to put it in, so we need to have somebody else look at it.
And then they ruined it.
And then, yeah, their trucks that ruined it, hauling on soil and stuff.
Are there trucks still being used, are they still using that road?
No, it's been blocked off quite a while now, so. But anyway, that's where it stands right now.
Cool.
I just think we need to put the pressure on Malacus. He is the one that hired Midwest Paving to put it in. We don't deal with Midwest Paving, we deal with Malacus.
Yes. And he called today, and I talked to him, and he's going to try to get something done here real soon. I told him we need to get it done right away, so he's going to talk to Doug Denny, and that's his contractor, and see what he can do. We'll see what happens.
So we have a meeting coming up, so.
Right.
Okay, benches. So we talked about benches last time. There was a bench that Stan liked, and there was a bench that I like. And I would just like to say, because I know like it could have gone either way. Out of respect for Stan and the fact that Stan kind of initiated this whole like change to town hall, and like it was his vision that kind of brought all this. I think that we should go ahead with the benches that Stan found that he wanted to sleep on the most, and order those ones. And also, I just want to throw this out there. There's an option to add a plaque to it on the bench, and I just thought it would be nice because Stan is retired from being on the council, and he's done so much. If we did get that plaque and maybe it said, like, in honor of Councilman Stan Kiger, something. I knew he would say that. Okay, well, for the record, I wanted to do that. But I'm fine with getting the benches that Stan found. He's going to be the one sleeping on them, not me, so.
I make a motion that we purchase those benches that stand for.
Second.
What's your name? It's been a motion made by Mark and seconded by Ron to purchase those benches. It was 2 8-foot benches, right? Yep. Okay, is there any any discussion or comments? Nobody wants to twist Dan's arm to let us put a plaque on it? Okay. Fine. We'll take a vote. How do you vote, Mark?
Yes.
Stan?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Carla? Yes. And I vote yes, so we'll get those ordered. Okay, banners. So Ron asked us all to bring our favorite banners for the polls, right? Okay, here am I. Yeah,
It's everybody, we're not gonna decide.
this isn't new. This is the one that he sent you before.
That I emailed, she didn't know about the email, sent everybody, send some ideas, but the catalog display company that we'll get them from, they're sending us, we called them today, and they're sending us a new catalog, because they haven't updated it, so everybody can really look at that. Hopefully it'll be here in a couple of days, distributed, and then we can look them over from there.
So you don't want my 2 cents?
Well, we can.
Let me just share with the crowd. This adorable winter banner, welcome to Aurora. This spring banner, except not this color because it's too dark. It's not very springy, so maybe a different color. This adorable thing, my home sweet home. Perfect. My favorite. This for late summer, fall, adorable sunflowers. And then fall, just this fall one. Let's see if there's any better ones in the catalog. There's mine. Okay, so we're not doing anything with the banners then?
No, but they have 21 days to make it, and our polls are going up by the end of August here. So it'll be, we can next week decide on we need 4 banners, so we decide on the ones for now. We can get other ones for spring and late Christmas and whatever, or we decide on 4, and our next meeting will be good. We can get them in and get them up on the polls.
What does these banners gonna cost a piece?
They're,
80.
they're about 96 bucks a piece. That's the customized one with Dayton. If you don't get them with Dayton on, they're like 63 or 68 bucks. And about $30.
But I feel like the ones that don't have, like, welcome to Dayton or something, a lot of them look just like a garden flag, which I love little garden flags. They're so cute. But then, like, blown up on a pole, they just don't make as much sense to me. So that's my opinion.
So we're getting 4 different ones, or we're doing one flag all the same?
Well,
Initially.
that's what we need to decide. Everybody needs a, we want 2 of each kind, do we want 4 of one kind?
4 of one
Four
kind.
different ones. I sort of like 4 of one kind versus 4 different kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you get too much of a hodgepodge up there, and then we got the festoons on our gazebo also. But to keep it simple,
I think around the Memorial Day or Veterans Day, I think we ought to have some military flags with the 4 services.
Oh, like 4 different ones, you mean?
Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines.
yeah, I think they got some in here, so. But everybody needs to get this catalog when it comes, and the updated one, because some, like this one, they don't have anymore. So
All right.
they changed it.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I guess
So-
we're not doing anything then. Is that
No,
it?
so that's it, so.
Okay. Was there any public comment or any comment from the council? Okay, having no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.